All right, guys, welcome back. I hope you all enjoyed the Super Bowl. Today we're going to talk about Clover Health in regard to the Hindenburg Research report that came out last week and Clover Health's response. Now, all of the allegations in the report and Clover Health's responses are way too much to take in just one video. So this will be part 1 of 2 or even perhaps even part 3. Let's dive into what Hindenburg had to say. Before we hit the details of what they had to say, let me give you my opinion on some of these short seller reports. I actually think they're a good thing. I know a lot of people see it as a hack job. I kind of view it equivalent as the ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. You might not like them, but they provide a service. And I think that the short sellers reports get us information that we might not otherwise have access to, and then we can use that information to make better decisions. Now, one of the things I don't like about some of these, to me, it's like watching CNN or Fox News when they give you their opinions about the news, the adjectives and adverbs. I just want the details. Don't give me your opinions about it. And I see some of those adjectives and adverbs sneaking into the Hindenburg report, which quite honestly, in my opinion, just makes me look like they're vindictive. Nevertheless, we'll go on, but I may point out some of those adjectives and adverbs as we go. Now, the timing of this release is a little bit suspicious, just given the recent GameStop and Wall Street bets controversy. It almost makes it look like Hindenburg is trying to do a hack job on Chamath Palihapitiya. But they do state in their report that they have been doing this for almost 4 months. So we'll give them credit for that, and the timing just looks a little suspicious. The first complaint. Critically, Clover has not disclosed that its business model and its software offering, called the Clover Assistant, are under active investigation by the Department of Justice. Let's just talk about that. Hindenburg provides a copy of something called a civil investigative demand. Now, it is important to note, and Hindenburg does state this, but they don't emphasize it, which happens in a lot of things. Even the Clover Health presentation has items in it that they don't emphasize, but they are there. So it's important to note that this civil investigative demand was received by a former employee of Clover Health and not by Clover Health itself. It states that the former employee is required to show up for oral testimony in regards to 12 items listed about Clover Health. What does Clover Health have to say about this first point, this civil investigative demand? They say Clover Health believes it has made all appropriate disclosures which were reviewed and vetted by outside counsel to all parties. Meaning they talked about this with their lawyers. And they believe that they made appropriate disclosures based upon their legal consultants. They say Clover has not received any civil investigative demands or subpoenas from the Department of Justice. Important to note, Clover has received a request for information from the Justice Department, to which we do with all requests from regulatory bodies. We responded. This was on a voluntary basis. So Clover has not received a civil investigative demand. They just received a request for information. There's a difference there. Is Clover under investigation? Hard to say. Has an investigation totally been opened, or are there just inquiries going on? That one's up to the legal folks to figure that out. But I think it's not as severe yet as what Hindenburg is trying to make out. So let's just talk about how a lot of these Medicare fraud investigations can get started. It gets started with a whistleblower frequently, and you need to understand that the whistleblower has a stake in the game. So there's a provision called the qui tam. Now, I know a lot of you will be saying, no, it's not qui tam, it's qui tam. I spent enough time in Italy to know that QUI is qui. I lived there for 3 years. So I'm going to stick with qui tam. So a writ of qui tam is a writ through which private individuals who assist a prosecution can receive for themselves all or part of the damages or financial penalties recovered by the government as a result of the prosecution. Essentially, a whistleblower stands to make some profit. Now, that in itself can be a conflict of interest. What we don't know from the Hindenburg Research report is whether the person, the former employee who received this civil investigative demand, was the whistleblower. Hindenburg goes on to state that Chamath is positioned to benefit regardless whether it works out for the average investor. They talk about Chamath receiving almost $290 million worth of stock value based on the current stock price for essentially putting in a minimum amount of money. Well, duh, that's just the way these deals work out. You should know that with IPOs and with these SPAC deals, There are people making millions, and it's not going to be the average investor. That's just the way the deals go. All right, Hindenburg says, we urge Chamath to answer the following questions. Did you know about the active DOJ investigation and about the underlying issues being investigated when you took the company public? If yes, why wasn't it clearly disclosed? The reply states Chamath and Clover were fully aware of the DOJ inquiry. To be clear, Clover does not believe it is or has been in violation of any rules or regulations related to the inquiry. They also go on to say in their reply, how the question was raised by Hindenburg, how could a DOJ inquiry not be considered material information? As heavily regulated organizations participating in Medicare Advantage, Clover and its peers receive frequent requests for information from regulatory bodies. These are typically confidential. We promptly respond to these requests as and when they come in. Now, Clover does at least provide in their prospectus this quote, from time to time we are and may be subject to regular and special governmental market conduct and other audits, investigations, and reviews by, and we receive and may receive subpoenas and other requests for information, blah, blah, blah. So Clover does at least say, hey, this, from time to time we are and may be subject to. It's just something to understand with healthcare. You do a lot of business and you may end up having some inquiries and hopefully not an investigation. For the most part, people in American healthcare are doing business legitimately, and the bad apples, they get caught and they pay a penalty. Now, has Clover ever had to pay a penalty? The answer is yes. In 2013, this document essentially here says that CMS, the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, told Clover, hey, your marketing is confusing to people using your product. They say that they asked Clover to change their marketing material, that Clover didn't, and then they paid a penalty or a fine of $106,000. As penalties go, this is pretty small. Now, some people may argue, well, this just emboldens Clover to do things worse because they didn't get penalized by much, and other people might say they didn't get penalized much because the infraction was fairly small. Now, the CID lists 12 items that the Department of Justice wanted to interview the former employee. I will let you pause the video and read all of these if you'd like to, but essentially, these are going to boil down to the way that Clover gets its patients. Essentially, Hindenburg is saying, well, Clover tells us that the reason that we're doing so well is our Clover Assistant. That is the thing that's driving the market share. And Hindenburg is arguing, no, it's not. It's your deceptive sales practices and the way that you recruit patients. The other two big allegations that Hindenburg makes against Clover says that they're using a Clover subsidiary to recruit patients and that they have a relationship with a Medicare Advantage broker who works for their company. Now, again, avoid the appearance of evil. Somebody at Clover, I think, should have been doing a little bit more due diligence on this, on how it would look when it came out. Let's talk about what this is. The first complaint has to do with Seek Medicare. It is a website where people who are looking for Medicare Advantage plans can go to get unbiased opinions about which would be the best Medicare Advantage plan for them. Now, the problem with this is that this company is essentially 50% owned by Clover Health and 50% by an unnamed investor. Well, they don't disclose that on Seek Medicare's website. So it does stink a little bit that people who are looking for an unbiased opinion are using a website that is 50% owned by Clover Health. Somebody should have been thinking, how is this going to look? Now, let's just talk about the results of what happens when people do go to this website. This comes from Clover Health's response, so I don't have any other data other than what Clover Health is providing, probably courtesy of Seek, but it says percent of Seek sales by insurance plan. So Cigna is getting 20% of the sales, essentially, Humana 20%, and we skip down to Clover, they're only getting 13.5% of the sales from Seek. So what we can say is that Clover is fourth on the list in terms of recommendations or actual purchases of Medicare Advantage plans coming from Seek. That's at least good. If they were first on the list, that would stink even more. But I think I agree with Hindenburg on this one. this doesn't look good. So Clover's response to this is Seek Medicare is a startup that was incubated and set up as a separate company from Clover. It has its own management team, board, employees. Then they say Clover and the outside investor share in governance of Seek at the board level. And they also state that in addition, this investor has unilateral contractual option to convert its investment into 50% equity ownership of Seek. So perhaps the outside investor doesn't even own 50% at this time. So Clover's head of sales is a person named Hiram Bermudez. He previously had founded a company called B&H Assurance. B and H just are the last names of the two founders. It's not unusual for Medicare Advantage plans or insurance companies or even mortgage companies to use a brokerage service. Essentially, the broker matches a client with the plan, and in return for matching with that, the insurance company or mortgage company gives the broker a payment. So Mr. Bermudez had a company that he founded that provided this type of service. The problem here is that he didn't relinquish his ownership stake in the company when he went to work for Clover Health. Now, I think you can see the conflict of interest. The chief of sales has a company that runs a brokerage service that will potentially be matching up patients with Clover Health. Definitely a conflict of interest here. Even if he's not doing anything wrong, you just got to avoid the appearance of evil. Now, in regards to the other marketing practices, Clover doesn't go into much of the response. Of course, remember that these complaints are coming from people who are not currently working from Clover, but they do say that they don't hand out gift cards for morale or thank you or motivation or friendship or for any other reason. In the next video, we'll go into the allegations regarding the Clover Assistant, as well as upcoding. I'll explain what upcoding means so that you have a better idea of what this allegation is talking about. Until next time, enjoy your investing.